like it's American history. Let's talk about that too. Like those are important inspirational stories.
Cool. Can we talk about slavery? If we can talk about Black history, can we please talk about how Black people got here and the systems that bear down on them since their like arrival in this country? No, because then conservatives bitch and moan that it's anti-white. But anyway, let's go take a look. Also, I'm definitely gonna put this. This is kind of on the longer end, so we're definitely gonna do 1.25.
The privilege discussion, like that's a great conversation for you to have with your child. But I don't think that taxpayer-funded hatred should be something that we allow in our schools.
Okay, bro, real talk though, like brother
JK,
to brother. Teaching white privilege does not inherently mean Black people are less. Factually incorrect.
Somebody went to a good school.
SATs.
No, gotta be careful.
I'm Mina Durson. I'm a correspondent here at Vice News, and we're going to talk about education today. We tried to bring a very diverse mix of voices here. Obviously, we're not going to be able to represent every single opinion out there when it comes to education, but we are really thankful for your time and for your perspectives. I also have 2 kids in school, so have experienced some of this from the parent side as well. So let's just start really broadly. What's the purpose of education?
I think the purpose of education is twofold. One, to help build and support the individual, but also help build and support society as a whole, because even though you may not have a kid in education, you pay taxes to public school, because we as a society depend on and need education for society to work.
I think the purpose of education is to educate and not indoctrinate. And I think that in a lot of ways we've strayed from that.
What a fucking idiot. You do know that all... Are we really going to start out with this? All education is indoctrination, you fucking idiot. Would you like to know why? It's actually rather simple, which she already said this. The point of having a public education system is to create citizens within your society. And we do that through the propagation of values that we teach our kids. As a kid, you're taught in school, don't steal, don't hit people, don't lie, be kind, make friends. Like you're taught all of these societally aligned like values along with history, math. Like half of schooling anywhere is the social like training that you get. And then the other half is like the raw education. But like some of the best stuff you get out of school is understanding how to exist in the society you are going to be living in, and more importantly, working in.
The original purpose of what it's supposed to be.
I think it should be intelligence and character. I think you should be able to understand the world around you and understand who you are and your purpose, and try to make the world a better place.
And character is always determined by what
memorizing
the
formulas,
society you live in,
understanding the world around you, but then also
determines is most valuable.
That, the idea that education, you have to balance the importance of memorizing the quadratic formula while simultaneously addressing social and political issues respectively, so children have both the know-how, general knowledge, and also kind of self-awareness and character.
I love this person's like this fucking color combo. I love this. You got the dark blue with the purple and then the pink. Solid.
Yeah, I think that the purpose of education is to understand the world that you exist in and use that understanding as a means for creating change or even understanding yourself on a deeper level.
I believe the purpose is simply just to prepare the individual to be successful in the society that they exist in.
Critical thinking, learn how to live out your full potential so you can be independent, and everything else really flows from there.
The purpose of education is to prepare children for the real life and also make sure that they are literate.
So I think the purpose is to raise the next generation of leaders. And when you think about what you want your leader
what a public school teacher answer.
to be like, you want them to be knowledgeable, and you want them to be compassionate, you want them to be self-aware, you want them to understand the best way to move forward, not just for themselves personally,
man,
but for
what a public school answer.
Who's doing the educating? Who should decide what's being taught?
Parents. I think that parents should have a huge say in what's going on in the classroom, because it's their kids, not ours.
So in that case, homeschool your fucking kids. So like, okay, so what do you do when like a parent is like, I don't like black people, you can't teach equality? Like, what? We just throw our hands up and go like, all right, I guess this kid I guess he goes to the other room to write the if he to go write the N-word in his notebook while we learn about the civil rights movement. Like how would we accommodate this? And the answer is like, we don't. We have a standard that we teach across the nation that gives the most amount of kids the most amount of education they can without pissing off every single person in the country. Unfortunately, conservatives are never not pissed about something, but like still, like we can't accommodate this. We can't accommodate every parent's biases into thousands upon millions of kids' educations, let alone the hundreds in their school.
Public school teacher 15 years.
What's up, Marky?
I was always aware that these are not my children. We have to make sure that we're respecting parents and their beliefs and their values.
I think the Constitution agrees with that.
Yes.
Here in America, ranging back to the early 1900s, plenty of Supreme Court cases have ruled
The
in that favor that
1900s?
it is the
They were
parents'
founded in the
right ultimately
1700s.
to decide a child's
This guy's
education,
a homeschooler?
medical needs, etc.
I would push back though and say that there does need to be collaboration, right? I completely respect your idea of it is not our job as educators to put forth a belief in front of children, right? That includes not perpetuating parents' beliefs in the classroom as well. In my opinion, that would be keeping a
always teaching
non-biased
beliefs.
viewpoint, simply
You're
presenting
always teaching
issues,
beliefs
and then
to those
allowing
kids.
kids to decide for themselves.
I would agree that I think it needs to be a collaborative effort. The way that we decide curriculum in Texas is that work groups comprised of community members, educators, parents, even in some cases students and public service officials come together to draft curriculum plans, and then it's ultimately decided on by our State Board of Education, which has a lot of kind of assistance from parents as well. So I think that kind of format can be really effective because it also empowers students to become—
I don't hate that. I actually like the idea of students being involved in their own education, in terms of at least driving like towards what they're interested in.
involved in the fate of their education. As a student myself, I think that that's incredibly important because our perspectives need to be heard as well.
The voices of parents need to be heard in that equation. But unfortunately, what we've seen recently is that parents' voices have been demonized in this process. You've seen parents who've criticized local school boards labeled terrorists simply for caring about the quality of their education that their child is receiving. These teachers are temporary caretakers.
The ones who show up and scream and yell and threaten violence.
In front of you. This idea
that would be terrorism.
Raised around that parent now has to explain. And at the end of the day, that isn't just confined to a classroom. Now it's bleeding into their upbringing, and there's only one person responsible for their upbringing, and that's the parents. It's not the educators, not the teachers.
You know what I'm really tired of? I'm really tired of parents being like, I'm really tired of parents like coming to like teachers or really coming to society and being like, now I have to explain gay people. You're gonna make me explain gay people to my kids. I can't explain that. I don't even understand it. And I can't help but be like, that's a fucking skill issue, man. I can't help you. If you're a dumb fuck and you can't explain the birds and the bees and the gays and the transes to your kids, then I don't know, fucking hire an educator or just shut the fuck up and let the actual educators do their job. But I'm so sick. I'm so fucking sick. I'm sorry. Of parents who are like, I don't know how to like parent and I don't know how to educate my kids, so I think my kids should just not be educated. Like, or like complain that it's like, like why, like now I have to. They told them that the gays were all right. Now I have to figure out a way to tell them. Like, how about you shut the fuck up? How about that? How about you either make a better argument or shut the fuck up instead of complaining that everybody else is educating your child when you have a lack of ability to do so.
It's their parents.
I like the idea of the collaboration, and obviously parents' voices belong at that table. I also like the emphasis on students having a say in this, and also other people adults that aren't parents. I'm invested in that too, even though I don't have children of my own.
And
I hear what you're saying about having to, like, parents needing to confront or address, I guess, like, what kids are learning
team
at school.
PTA meetings.
Giving kids the exposure to other ideas or other things that they wouldn't be exposed to otherwise is, I think, part of what's going to help raise the next generation of people that are able to look outside their own lived experience.
But I think that oftentimes those different ideas
that was them fucking around with their cameras
as a student as the only idea. When you're being taught that, oh, there's this many genders or anything like this, where you haven't been exposed to that in your own household, it's being presented as like the end all be all when it actually isn't. It's about educating and not indoctrinating.
God damn, Vice, get a hold of your fucking camera situation. Also, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, gender, like the gender stuff is like any parent can disagree and be like, I don't think there are more than 2 genders, but they're just factually incorrect. Mainly because there can be an unlimited amount of genders. They're creations of society.
As long as that is presented as a counterpoint to, well, there's people who believe this, but there's also people who believe this, that's okay. The reality of it is that in most classrooms across the country, that isn't what's happening.
And to piggyback off of that, one side is labeled as a bigot, white supremacist, homophobic. There's a lot of parents in America that are Christian or, they believe in 2 genders.
You're right, we should just call them Christians instead of all those things. If you say that,
as a teacher especially, you could be labeled as homophobic. So there isn't this unbiased classroom because there's one side that can't really
You say the gays don't exist, then that's
the other side without
homophobic.
Risk of, losing our jobs.
But you two are kind of the ones that brought in the conflict of like, there is an indoctrination going on only one side. It has this opinion and this side is not allowed to talk and we have to be quiet. When really you guys are actually the loudest in regards to this issue thus far, right?
Now, yes,
so yeah,
this room,
so I wouldn't necessarily say that.
God damn. God damn.
I do want to push
I love
away,
this person's
possible,
fit.
and
I
would love
love
for you to hear
their
this, right?
approach.
It's the idea of someone
great.
sees me and they go, oh, you're one of those that teach that there's 72 different types of gender. Desmond Fambrini, he, him, gender fluid, bisexual. My students do not know this because it doesn't come up because I'm a learning specialist and it's my job to educate and teach a curriculum, right? Now, if I'm asked directly by a parent or if there's confusion, oh, why do you wear makeup? Same reason why girls do, because it's fun for me. It doesn't need to be this very controversial, I'm gonna mess with this child's upbringing, they're gonna go home and they're gonna turn into a gender fluid, they're gonna do 72 genders.
I think that's a question you say you should go ask your parents about how they feel about that.
Well, so, okay.
Teachers are supposed to teach reading, math, science.
No, that's not, no, you dumb fuck, you dipshit, you fucking tadpole. That's not what teachers do. Teachers do not simply, like, holy shit. If you've ever been in a classroom where a teacher only read you the fucking textbook and like on slides, that's not an educator. That's a fucking stenographer. Those are bad teachers. You do not want teachers. Like, I remember in my civics class, we had this teacher, his name was Mr. Green. Dude was fucking nap time incarnate. Absolutely no personality. He would just, like, there weren't posters up there wasn't a poster up in his entire room. There wasn't paint on the walls. There wasn't a map. The only thing in his entire room was like a fucking like it was like a little like a Constitution poster. Like, that was it. He had a Constitution and like a Bill of Rights posters that were like up in the back, and that was it. His whole entire class was him getting up and just reading the textbook. We learned nothing because we all fell the fuck asleep. Educators, teachers engage with their students on any given topic in like a million different ways, using like not just like direct examples, but indirect examples, and finding ways to relate any of the historical topics to their like classmates. Curriculum like dictates that you need to have, like, you know, if you're learning about like Martin Luther King Jr., you don't just go and fucking read the textbook article on fucking MLK. You don't just pull up the Wikipedia article and read that dry as shit. No, you present it in a way that kids can learn and understand and be usually mildly entertained, because that's how they lock it into their brain. Like, this whole thing where it's like teachers are only meant to like teach the like raw facts. It's like, no, you can just give kids textbooks for that. In that case, you don't need educators. Educators are not fucking like stenographers. They're not just fucking reading exactly what the textbook says. What they're doing is relating that information. That's the actual job of an educator. Like, oh, this dude has no understanding of what, like, of how to be a teacher. Like, what am I supposed to do? I worked at at a fucking like sports summer camp for a couple years, right? What am I supposed to do? Just fucking stand there when the kids, it's time to kick a ball, and I just go, move your leg from this point to this point, and then you've kicked. No, you play games, you relate it, you practice with them, you like try to get them to understand if they're having trouble. Like, you know, if it's like a soccer ball, it's like, okay, you don't kick it just with your toes. You want to kick it with the inside of your foot. You want to do sweeping drills. You want to do any of the rest of this. It's just fucking stupid. It's fucking stupid. This person doesn't understand education, but they're just like, oh my God, like the teachers are indoctrinating the kids, even though they already get indoctrinated by whatever the society has already decided is acceptable behavior. Like, yeah, no shit.
Actually going to make them contributing members of society. Answering a child's questions about whether or not men or women should be wearing makeup or not is, I don't think, within that realm.
Okay, so you said science, right? So we're talking about physical science, we're talking about human anatomy and biology here. So a child says, I thought boys could not wear makeup. I have an X and Y chromosome and I'm wearing makeup. I could factually answer that without indoctrinating with any opinion.
But it's in no way scientific, your answer to that question.
How is that not scientific?
I would say maybe cultural, or it's a perception or an opinion. But it's in no way scientific.
Anyone else? I am a chatty person, so I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to let's see if anyone else has something.
It's not scientific that you just proved that a male can wear makeup, because logically, if a male ever wears makeup, it means that, like, Jesus, I'm glad they said it.
I just have one question for you, because not all homes are welcoming or open or conversation or safe. So how do we balance that?
I think that what we're saying is that there's certain conversations that are not to be had with a teacher. And I think that the argument that a lot of people on the right and conservatives are making is that we just don't feel as if actors of the state should be having conversations that are taxpayer-funded conversations with children about conversations that have not come up in their own households. And to that point, if you can't talk about God in the classroom, why can we talk about every gender under the sun, right? I think that's the conundrum that we find ourselves in. If we are banning those conversations, we've banned those a long time ago, then how can we have these conversations just because they're...
Is he trying to equivocate between like, hey, there's people who might be gay, non-binary, or trans, to fucking religion? These two things are completely different. One of them is a gender identity, another is like a sexual orientation, like, and then there's believing in Jesus, which I don't know, we like explicitly have that in the Constitution. Like, just in general, a separation of church and state is already there, written into our societal doctrines. So just on the basis of like our foundations of the United States, we already accounted for religion in the classroom and already decided, nah, we don't want any part of that shit. But like gender ideology or even like sexual orientation, none of these things are beliefs. These things are like facts. These things are identities. These things are inherent traits. Like these aren't the same thing. Nobody is born a Christian, because you're not born with like, you have to get taught who Jesus is. If it was the case that you were born a Christian, born a Catholic, born anything, you would come out and you'd already be mouthing off about Jesus. But you don't, do you? Because you have to be taught all of that stuff. You have to be told that, like, why does this happen? Oh, because Jesus says it. Like, anyway, Jesus Christ.
Belong to a different side of the political aisle.
So I think we actually talk about God in the classroom all the time, right?
Yeah.
Who's taught religion? Who's taught world religions? Who's taught like history in the way that, you know, Puritans, like, and that's okay, because God is part of the fabric of history and whatever else.
Also, that's theology.
This is how Christianity originated. This is how Islam originated. We don't talk about like, this is what this gender is, and this is if you feel this way, then there's gender affirmation therapy, all those things.
I think you actually bring up a really good parallel of like, I feel comfortable and I feel like it is okay to talk about identity issues the same way we talk about God. Not indoctrinating anyone, not telling this is what you have to be or you have to believe, but saying this is something that some people believe.
But in the sense of gender identity, I don't...
We already teach theology. Like in schools, you can already, like, they will teach you like when X or Y religion cropped up and what the general beliefs are. The same way, like in schools, you can talk about like, oh yeah, there's man, there's woman, there's boys, there's girls, and then there's people who are non-binary. They're just kind of neither. They don't really identify strongly with one side or the other. There's like gay people who are into people of the same, you know, guys, you know, girls are into girls, boys are into boys, like that sort of thing. Like it's not, none of this is like, yeah, these are all factual things. What he wants taught is like doctrine. He wants he wants like religious beliefs taught. Like Jesus created, like, you know, he clay morphed all of us or whatever. I guess that's God. God clay morphed all of us at the beginning of time. That's what he wants. Which is like, no. That's not what we're teaching. That's what you're talking about is like doctrine. You're actually saying religion. What they're teaching is theology.
See that parallel. How is that making someone more literate, more successful?
What I hear you saying is that learning about different gender identities does not make somebody a more considerate, well-rounded person, but learning about different religions does make you a more considerate, well-rounded person.
I'm saying that is a part of history. I don't understand where gender identity falls
so
within.
We already teach theology, you
religious
dipshit.
history and God comes into play in terms of history, cool. But don't gay people and trans people too? It's not like I'm the first transgender person to ever walk this earth. Like there are trans people that were, and gay people who were part of major movements in this country, like from the civil rights movement to the feminist movement to, I mean, obviously Stonewall. Like, isn't that part of history too?
Let's just take a step back. So just show of hands.
No, let him answer. Oh, I hate when they do this. They fucking like they push them back to the edge and they're like, all right, now figure it now you need to now hit the Uno reverse card and hit me with that conservative fucking parry into strong heavy overhead. But no, they always fucking do this. They're always like, the conservative always gets back to the edge of the mountain and then they're like, okay, now let's stop. And it's like, no, let him fucking answer.
Who here thinks public school is the best option for kids? Okay. And who thinks private school is the best option for kids? who thinks homeschool is the best option for kids? And then some of you guys didn't raise your hands at all.
It's so challenging to pick one right answer for that, because essentially what you're asking is, who do you trust the most with your children? Who do you trust to give them the cultural values that I have, and then fill in the gaps where I don't necessarily know the answer, but I trust that they're experts and are going to give my children the attention that they need in order to develop so that they can be a better version of themselves.
If I had to choose one, it's public school. It is the best tool we have to give everybody a chance at a good education, no matter where you come from, how much money you have. Public schools, where not everybody thinks the same and people are coming from all walks of life, is a good microcosm of that global experience, where you can learn critical thinking skills and learn how to be a good community member, because not everybody looks like you or thinks like you.
Also, I would argue that public schools are going to give you, she makes a great point that I didn't even think of. Like, if you're going to a public school, you're most likely going to have a closer to one-to-one experience of the United States, of this society, coming out of a public school than you will coming out of a private school. A lot of private schools, mostly you're going to be interacting and surrounded by a lot of people who probably share your class, but also share kind of your cultural and some of your more cultural biases. Whereas if you're going to public school, you're gonna get I went to a public school. We had rich kids, we had poor kids, we had middle class kids, we had upper middle class. We had basically the full spectrum of class divisions in terms of our student base, along with a really wide and varied cultural set. We had a big Hispanic community, a lot of African Americans, white kids from the burbs, white kids from the poor areas. We had a really, really diverse mix of kids. And that's going to prepare you a lot more going out into the world than if you're going to a private school that maybe there's a few people of color and everyone's pretty well off. You don't really get that experience of going over to a friend's house and maybe they're wildly more rich than you, and you see all of that and you contextualize wow, their house is way bigger, but they do things kind of different. And I'm sure it'd be nice having this money, but I like my, middle class family. Or even if you go over to somebody who's poorer than you, maybe it gives you an appreciation for kind of where they come from in the world or how hard your family works or whatever. But you can get a lot out of those experiences. But I feel like you don't get that as much in private schools because people are self-selecting into those spaces.
You're shaking your head.
Well, first of all, our schools are more segregated ever than our public schools, especially in blue states. New York and California have the most segregated schools. And on top of that, we are in a place where our public schools are not safe, especially the last 20 years. And I just don't see why sending our kids to these environments where it's unsafe. We also used to be, because I used to be on the left, we used to be against the institutionalization of our children. These kids are being institutionalized. Having these places where there's 2,000, 3,000 kids. I'm okay with public school, but the problem with it is that it's become an environment where it's just almost like the school to prison pipeline. We used to talk about that in the 90s. We're not talking about that anymore. And I think that's something that parents need to wake up about, and America needs to wake up about, the institutionalization of our children.
I talk about school to prison pipeline all day, every day. And I hear what you're saying, that it's terrible that there are parents who are sending their kids to schools that are not safe. However, what about the parents that don't have a choice? I'm thinking about the most marginalized community when I said public schools here, because I agree with you, the public schools have a lot of work to do to become the safe places where our kids are not.
Also, when it comes down to it, she's talking about this from a public school perspective. Public schools are not private schools. Private schools are privately funded by fucking donors, by rich people. They're going to be safer because again, the what's the word? The largest, the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? What am I thinking? Not identifier. I can't think of the term. But the thing, okay, so my point being is that the identifier that basically that can predict your propensity to crime, to violence, any of this stuff, is going to be poverty. Meaning if you live in poverty, you're at a much higher risk of committing crimes, violence, any of that stuff. Just simply being that you're so on the edge of resources that that desperation is going to push you towards more extreme actions, which like is kind of obvious. Like, yeah, that makes sense. So if you fill schools with people who are coming from a much lower socioeconomic class, it only makes sense that you're going to see more dangerous schools, because you've housed it with people in more desperate situations, which at the end of the day comes down to how we fund schools, which a part of it unfortunately becomes like, schools are all funded by housing taxes, which if your houses aren't worth very much, or if you don't even have a lot of homeowners in your area, your school's not going to get a lot of funding. There's not a lot of money that's going to go into it. Not a lot of money to pay the teachers, not a lot of money to pay for resources, not a lot of money to build the infrastructure. Like, you're not going to, and as those resources degrade, the opinion and the view of them are obviously going to degrade. And if you're in a neighborhood, if your school's in a neighborhood where, again, there's a lot of crime, there's a lot of people in desperate situations, they're not going to have any, they're not going to have any respect for any of the stuff that you've built that's hardly holding on. They understand that, oh, we have a shitty school because nobody gives a fuck because we don't get money for our school, so the education obviously isn't that important. I'm better off staying in the streets, selling drugs, and like trying to make money than waste my time going to school, getting an education, working some shitty job that isn't even going to pay me very well. Like, at the end of the day, there's a lot of varied reasons as to why these schools are like kind of the way they are. But none of those come down to, I think, like the school being public. It comes down to how we organize the public funds for these schools.
Not in institutions where they're ignored or not giving the services they need. And also, for the people that don't have a choice and that is the only option their kids have, I just believe that's worth fighting for. That's why I said
absolutely. I'm a big advocate for school choice.
Well, why don't we just show of hands? Who believes in school choice?
Can you specify like what you mean by
that? So that's where parents can apply the money that they pay to taxes. They get vouchers and they can put that into any school that they want. It's very popular in red states right now, and a lot of blue states are against it, especially teachers unions are against it, because it's taking money away from the public schools and creating more of a competitive market.
Right. That's why I wouldn't raise my hand.
Yeah. Sometimes with school choice, it gets a little bit tricky, right? My first class the first day, I had 25 students. By day 2, I had 19, because 6 parents switched out of the class because they saw me, and they were like, there's no freaking way, before I even got a word in.
As a parent, I would want to know, like, do you not...
Also keep in mind, if we went to a system where so understand, like, the school choice voucher system, the reason why most leftists, and I'll explain my big opposition to it, is simply that, like, you are funneling money out of a public system that is beholden to you. If you live in a neighborhood, you send your kid to a public school, your money goes to that public school has a responsibility to respond to your interests and to deliver a good education to your child, right? What the school voucher system in these private and like charter schools tend to do is obviously, you trade the money that you would send to taxes that now doesn't go to that school, meaning the school that your kid previously went to, the public school, now doesn't have money going towards it, meaning whoever's left in that school now has less resources going towards their education, which, that's one bad thing. The people who are left outside of the system are kind of fucked. But now your money is going to a private institution. Now, the difference between private institutions and the public ones is that private institutions have one goal in mind, and that is to turn a profit, meaning that it might be the case that for the first, year, we'll say, let's go with this. There's 4 years of high school. Your freshman year and your sophomore year, your parents decide to pull you out of public school. They get a voucher. They send you to a private school, right? Your first 2 years, all of their tax dollars, that they would have, that gets allocated to the school, buys them their vouchers. But what happens when when junior year and senior year roll around? What happens when tuition, just like college tuition, starts to go up? What do you do now? Now, the money that you pay out of taxes isn't enough to buy you your full voucher. Now, parents are paying tuition on top of this voucher for your junior year. Maybe it goes up next for your senior year. Maybe there's another charter school that moves into the area, and now you have two of them. But with both of them competing against each other, you have, maybe you have your old, the public school that's still always going to be there, but the money you now have has to go to one of those two. And now it's like, the tuition might be higher at this one, it might be lower at that one, but is the quality of your education getting any better? So we already see this kind of with colleges, and there's a lot of colleges and they kind of compete for students, but they also select for certain kinds of students. But something that they also do with a lot of the funds is they won't put it into educational resources. They'll put it into their football team, their basketball team, their stadium, their whatever. So the worry I have is you're going to end up seeing, as these charter schools become more prevalent, as they push the public school basically out of existence, they've now raised the bar. They've now created basically a paywall that you have to pay to get into school at all. That is going to be above the tax dollars you would have ever put in. You could look at a situation where there are two charter schools and one public school in your local town, and both private schools are going to cost you all of the money that you would have spent to send your kid to public school, plus extra for tuition for each of those, which maybe they compete with each other, or if they're in a situation where they have too much control of that market, you have no choice. You either pull your kid out and they go to public school, which is dog shit education now because there's almost no money going towards it, or B, you now have to pay whichever one of them is charging you just a little bit less. But no matter what, it's always going to go up because they always want to increase profits. Their goal is not to deliver an education to your child, but instead to turn a profit on educating your child. That's the big difference, and that's the thing that I worry about.
Think that is okay, or they're right to withdraw when they see you, because ultimately you're probably an excellent educator.
I appreciate that.
I have no doubt about that, but I think we get into muddy waters when we start trying to take that choice away from the parent.
Do I think that it is okay for a parent to see me and go, not around my kid? No, I don't think that's okay. I feel like that's really crossing the line because you are, for lack of better words, discriminating.
You also
against
can't
me
choose
openly.
this.
That's like being a black teacher and being like, there's no way. It is the same. It is the same.
It's still the right of the parent to make that decision as to whether or not they want their child to learn from you.
Okay.
It's still that parent's right. You can disagree with their motivations, their motives, their ideas.
So here's the question. No matter what taxpayer dollars are going to go into this, what societal benefit do we get from people not exposing their kids to other races, to people of other sexual preferences? Is there a societal incentive to having kids be basically educated outside of the existence of gay or black people? Or if you have a parent that doesn't like black people, doesn't like gay people, right? You have a parent who's like, oh, I don't want my kid being taught by the gays or the blacks, right? Do we, because again, it's still your tax dollars. Just because it's going to a private institution, it's still the tax dollars you're paying. Is it societally beneficial to reinforce that parent's bigotry? I'd love to hear the argument for pro-bigotry.
Would you say
because you can't avoid gay or black people,
even if you want to decide on a different learning environment for your
in the
kid,
rest of the world.
The people that do not have the option to send their child to a different place,
they can't go to a cashier and be like, no, I want a white guy to ring me up. That's not a thing that can happen. So it's not preparing them. That's not preparing them. So should a parent have the ability to deny their child preparation to enter into society? Is that, again, a societal interest that we have? I don't think so.
Bar should not be so low. And that's my concern with school choice, is that sometimes people think that if everyone flees to the suburbs, who is teaching in these schools where everyone has decided they don't want their tax dollars going to? And that's one of the big concerns. With funding of education being the way that it's set up, it essentially makes it so that the people that are stuck with these as their options don't end up with as good a school. And everyone deserves to have their kid go to a good school.
Well, if there's school choice, they won't be stuck with those options. They can have other options. That's the whole point of that. Also, it is the school district's job to appropriately use those budgets. Most of the budget in the schools aren't going to the teachers. We got cafeteria workers, janitors, all of these people that are getting paid.
It used to be 9 out of 10 people that were employees of schools and districts were teachers. Now it's 50-50.
Yes.
So there is some mismanagement of funds in this country. We actually fund our kids really well.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly.
Too many administrators.
Just to go back a little bit to like when you guys are raising your hands about the different choices.
Too many administrators. Do you think that's the case in the private sector? Have you ever worked in the private sector? Do you think that there's a lot of admin in the private sector? An overabundance of middle managers, people who just, you know, they just oversee a bunch of random shit but don't actually contribute any value to any like institution or corporation? How often do we see this? All the fucking time. Like, all the fucking time. If you think that a private school that's there to make money, like we see this in, again, colleges. Colleges are private institutions, and they constantly misuse their funds because the way that they want to drive value for their universities is not through educational resources. It's through bells and whistles. It's through stadiums. It's through football teams, basketball teams, new wings of whatever the fuck. This is the privatization of education. It becomes less about the education and more about like impressing parents to get them to pay more money.
You raised your hand for homeschooling. Can you talk us through like why do you think homeschooling is the best option?
Well, if we look at the history of this country, a lot of people were homeschooled. A lot of our founders were homeschooled. Like they only went to school till 3rd grade, a lot of them. And I think what has happened is parents have decided that the government is going to do a better job at raising their children than themselves. We have also come to a place where school is taking up the majority of our day. And we have this mistrust of parents that they can't educate their own children. And I think that that's wrong. I think that a lot of parents, and if you look at homeschool data, like my friend Phil right here, he's got 7 kids and he's homeschooling them all. And actually homeschool kids are turning out really well.
I think you bring up a lot of very valid points, but I have to say, and I just want your opinion on this, I would never homeschool my own kids. And I want my kids to be smarter than me, than I ever was. How am I going to have a child that is smarter and does better than I do if I'm their only teacher?
You grow alongside your child.
Okay.
I think as a teacher, I feel like I've learned the most in my life as a teacher, like more so than in college. And
also, not that homeschooling's like bad, immoral, or like I don't have as strong opinions on homeschooling as I do in terms of private school, but like when it comes down to it, I can't help but wonder, like when it comes to private school kids, I always just like, my observation always becomes that they're socially stunted. They like don't know how to relate to the rest of the world as well because they just haven't been exposed to it. They've been exposed to their household, but like not every household is their household. Not every person is their it's just very insular. Not again, I don't have as big of opinions, as strong of opinions, but yeah, that would be my fear for homeschooling kids.
So parents becoming teachers actually good for them as well.
And even in the public schools, a lot of teachers are relying on the lesson plans. Speaking from experience, I got into credit where my wife does homeschooling, and I've watched that process of her learning alongside, to make sure when they ask these questions, I'm getting knowledge on the material as well, so I can help you get through it. Nothing replaces that value, that bonding time that she gets to have with the kids.
I taught high school for 6 years, and I quit, and I'm a stay-at-home mom with my own kids. So we're a one-income family. We're lucky enough to be able to live off of my husband's salary. Would you say that most homeschool families have one parent working?
I do think the statistics show that is the case.
It's like the only way to do it well.
Pretty much. And, another misconception, though, is that they think it's a matter of income and homeschool families have to be rich and et cetera. And I think the average homeschool family makes like $65K. So the reality is they're scaling back and making sacrifices for this lifestyle because they value what is coming out of it.
So let's just say that for the people that homeschool isn't an option, what is for so many people it's not, I do not think that school choice is the way to go about that, which I know is a lot of people's answer to that.
That's also the thing. Like, we don't live in a one-income country. We live in for the most part, we live in a 2-income country. So like, homeschooling just isn't, you can do it, but it's not a solution for educating our entire population.
Can we just get Sean in here? What are your thoughts on this?
School choice gives people an exit ramp. You get to send your kid to a school that best fits what you think is best for their development. At the end of the day, it's kitchen table conversations about we've worked hard to raise a family. We want to spend our money in a way that best fits our child, best fits our family. And when you don't have school choice, you do make those trade-offs. There are real consequences there.
The school is considered one of those shared spaces, one of those last kind of shared spaces where you might bump into someone who maybe comes from a different background than you, has a different ideology than you.
Okay.
What do you lose if you homeschool and then you're not putting yourself in these kind of situations?
What you lose is negative influences. One of the biggest things I think when it comes to homeschool is keeping my kids away from your bad kids. We've went and taken our children to pride parades. And you know what I mean? We've been there, we've been loving, and we showed support to the people there. But at the same time, we explain our views on the matter that we believe marriage is between a man and a woman. And from experience and talking to people, I understand that a lot of people who choose that lifestyle, it is based on trauma. A lot of were molested or sexually assaulted as children. So I don't think it's okay for...
Which is not true. Like, when it comes down to it, like, he can, like, so this is the thing is he's like, you know, we go to pride parades, we understand, but it's like, you've just demonstrated that you don't. You have, like, no understanding of what you're talking about. Like, you've just demonstrated that if this is what you're teaching your kids, then you're teaching them homophobic propaganda and homophobic stereotypes. To which it's like, all right, like, again, I'm going to say it. What's the societal, you know, what's the societal incentive to you being homophobic? You know, it's...
For me to teach to my children that this is something normal we ought to accept when it doesn't progress society. We would not be able to procreate if everybody were to choose that lifestyle. So I think it's okay for me as a parent to say, hey, this exists, that
stupid.
Exists, but this is our view on it, and this is how we want to present it to them.
Do you think it's somewhat problematic that you're going like, well, this is our viewpoint, that marriage is between a man and a woman because we can't move society forward with gay couples? Like, we've factually proven that incorrect. I can actually tell you that gay parents on average make exceptional parents and do exceptional things with kids because they adopt, and they only adopt kids when they are financially capable, which actually makes kids of gay parents actually more successful and academically competent. So gay parents actually are very good at moving society forward, and we have the statistics to prove
Could that be a long-term solution, though, if a large population chose to choose that lifestyle? There would be no...
Wait, but that's not how that works, though. Nobody is saying that if you can be gay, everyone will be gay. There's, like, gay people are just going to be a percentage of the population, the same way whites are, the same way blacks are, the same way Asians are. Like, being gay is not like this, well, I mean, he might think it's a contagion, I guess. But it's not an all or nothing. It's just they exist amongst the rest of us. Like, and again, this is obviously coming from somebody who isn't that educated on this stuff. And, like, you know, will defend like, oh, I teach my kids fine. It's like, well, if this is what you're teaching them, I'm not sure if you are. Like, this is the best you could come up with. And also, like, the conservatives here, keep in mind that the idiot from earlier got on his high horse about, like, oh, indoctrination, and like the schools are only teaching you know, this one angle, and they're not teaching both sides of whatever this or that opinion, right? Do you think he's teaching do you think he's teaching both sides? Or do you think he's saying, okay, so these people think it's okay to be gay. It's not. We don't think that's correct, and it's not. We, like, if these people were everyone, society would, like, die within 50 years. So, like, they're wrong, but that's what they believe. And like, and notice, like, none of the conservatives are interested. Like, well, nobody's jumping in on the conservative side and being like, well, hey, aren't you just teaching only one side? Because they're not interested in teaching. They're interested in forwarding whatever their political ideology is. They themselves prove by their silence on this, prove that they're not interested in the ceasing of indoctrination. They just want the indoctrination to be their indoctrination. Their doctrines are the ones that they want in, you know, cemented in the minds of children. Even though, again, society gains nothing from the kind of, like, small-minded, like, not educated enough opinions of these people. They're just not equipped with the ability to even think or conceptualize any of this stuff. And they want to be able to say, well, I should have a right to like to make my kids or keep my kids ignorant. To which I can't help but be like, do you have a right to keep your kids ignorant? Is that a right that you have? What about the rights of your kids to not be maleducated? Like,
okay, so first of all, no one is choosing this lifestyle.
That's an opinion.
Okay,
it's not an opinion. It's just.
Okay, sorry.
Did you choose to be straight, sir?
I've been teaching for 15 years.
So
and
have I.
will say that there is some kids now that are going for that community that are doing it not out of a genuine, and there's pockets of them too. Like you'll notice like friend groups of girls that will all of a sudden decide that they're now trans.
The idea of LGBTQ being trending and the idea of teaching kids that being gay is a choice, those are two very different
things. So I answer that, yes, I chose to be straight. Absolutely.
So
can you tell us about it? So you could be attracted.
I want somebody to tell me about this. How did you come to the decision? Like because when it comes down to it, you have to ask. It's like, all right, you chose to be straight. Okay. Okay, you chose. What were the factors that made you choose women? Right? If you're a dude, why women and not men? What is it about those two things? But and it's like, okay, when did you come to this decision? It's like, oh, well, I guess I always knew that. And it's like, okay, so you didn't choose this. This wasn't an active thing. You didn't go, do I like vagina or do I like dick? I really like popsicles and lollipops. They're and like hot dogs. I really, really like cylindrically shaped food. But I don't know. I'm not sure if I want that inside. I don't know. Did you was this an active decision? No, it wasn't. It's just something you kind of felt after a point. It's just kind of something you either oh, titties. I love titties. They're great. Or you didn't. I don't understand this. People who are it was a choice. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? What is this weird choice shit? I'll tell you right now, I saw boobies in some movie trailer and then went, those look like some nice boobies. And that was it. That's as much thinking as it took from me. It was a reaction. And reactions aren't choices, you idiots. Ugh.
To me if you wanted to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And let me explain. I have seen transgendered people who I thought were born female that were very attractive. I didn't know. Now, once I find out that that's not what you are, I am choosing not to pursue that. You're first of all, there's a lot of societal stigmas that are driving you towards that. But yeah, that's a pretty society tells you that that's weird. So you think it's weird. But you were still you didn't choose to be attracted to a hot ass trans woman. You didn't choose to be attracted to that person. You saw gendered identifiers and sexual secondary traits that all aligned with things that you preferred. Nobody nobody chooses ass or titties. Somebody asks you and you have to, and the answer you're gonna give, and then you try to post hoc justify which one you prefer. Every straight guy out there, this to be true. So yes, you can be attracted to someone that is of another gender.
Let's talk about what do you think should be taught about gender identity in school? What do you think is being taught?
I want to go back to something you were saying earlier that's related to this about you're seeing trends, and I am too, right? Last semester, when I was teaching, I had a trans kid in every classroom, and I was like, whoa, when I started teaching,
it was one in school.
There was none, right? And I'm like, this is, wow.
And they were really for it, too.
And
they went for it.
And I'm hearing you that is something I'm seeing, too, in the classrooms. Fair, okay. Now, I'm not gonna presume to be in the heads of those kids and to understand, what's real for them or whatever, but I will tell you this. Historically speaking, a disproportionate number of kids who are gay, who are trans, who are any of the LGBTQI, fill in the letters, right? Didn't live to see adulthood. Maybe that's why we don't have an older generation of trans adults, because
I attended a funeral of a trans student last month.
A lot of them didn't make it. And so when I hear about kids feeling comfortable enough to try expressing something where maybe they wouldn't be able to do in other spaces. And I understand that maybe that's not what you want for.
Also, and I'm gonna say, what's the harm? If there's like she mentions, oh, there's a group of girls who thinks they're trans. It's cool. Let them do that then. Some of them it'll be genuine. Some of them it'll be a trend. like anything else, like music, like makeup, like anything, any of these things. Somebody in that group is genuine about their like interest in that identity, in that the honesty of that identity. Maybe not all of them, but that's okay. If all of them like, you know, participate, and it allows one person to maybe feel like what's the word, safe enough to explore that in a more open manner, and then that person ends up being trans and the others go like, oh yeah, I mean, something thought about, but you know, it was more their thing, I think, you know, not so much my thing, like, you know, a little bit but not as much, but that's their thing in the friend group. Like, yeah, that's like fine, like there's no harm done to any of this
for you, your kids. But I'm thinking about the most marginalized and vulnerable people, and unfortunately, statistically, for our queer youth, disproportionately, they fall in that category.
Mind you, with the whole concept of school choice, I'm all for parents who agree with what you're teaching, sending their children to you. I just think ultimately it should be within the parent to make that choice.
What do you think should be taught in sex ed?
I think it should be health education, yes. I taught middle school and high school, and they started giving it to my students in 7th grade, and I have students come back to me traumatized because I think sex ed has gone away from what it was. There are some lessons, like for example, they have a lesson where the kids in 3rd grade in the New Jersey curriculum, there's a picture of a woman's spread eagle, and they're learning all the different body parts of the clitoris and the stuff. Every child is different. Some are not developmentally ready for this or mature enough for it.
I grew up with abstinence education.
That's pretty rough.
Where we didn't talk about sex ed until middle school, but mostly 10th grade and high school. But I think that middle school is far too late to be talking about sex ed. And it's not because I think that 2nd graders are, you know, wanting to be promiscuous, but like having sex ed scaffolded because it is a preventative measure against sexual assault, often being done in the home.
Just because that happens in the home doesn't mean that we need to label all parents as not capable of teaching sex to their children and giving it to teachers.
But
well, no, but you fucking idiot. You want to guarantee that all kids are getting this, so that all kids, like, it's like if we could put fucking like car resistant body armor on kids, and they're like, what, do you think all parents are bad drivers? Like, no, it's just, it'd be nice to have all kids have car protective body armor. Like, it's just kind of something we would all like to have. 0% of them have any exposure to this. It's like, you know, if fucking one kid does not have sexually assaulting parents, then great, they get educated, whatever. But if like the like two desks over, you have some kid who is, you're hitting both of those. You're re-securing the kid who you know isn't having those problems, and you're addressing the one that is having those problems. Like, what is this? Like, what? Fucking idiot. What the fuck?
Teachers, for a lot of children, are the only trusted adults, and it is incredibly dangerous to remove teachers who are trained professionals to deal with these crises in the home from the situation, and that's just like a funnel for child abuse.
I think a huge thing that's missing in education in the schools when it comes to sex ed is consent.
Yes.
You know, that's not being taught at all, to my understanding. I never learned it in schools, and that creates consequences when you look at the situations that are going on here.
I think that we have such a hypersexualized society. Too. Obviously, kids are having sex younger. They're hooking up younger. It's just reality. I would rather those individuals, and also from a pro-life perspective, know how to have safe sex and preventative sex that prevents pregnancies than them to just go around willy-nilly just doing whatever they want.
So there's a lot of middle schoolers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that are getting pregnant at earlier ages, and we're starting to rank like the highest nationally in terms of middle school pregnancies. And that's because a lot of middle schoolers are, again, like you said, like getting sexually involved earlier. Whatever
it's
it
the
is,
Cardi B music.
Whatever it is, it's happening, and we need to be able to address it.
It's the Cardi B. Yes. It's always culture with these guys. They like it couldn't possibly be that we're like not educating our children on sexual education. It's that like somebody came out with a song that had some dirty words in it. Yes. Yeah. First of all, the real question is, who's letting their like fucking 2-year-old or whatever, who is letting their 2nd grader listen to Cardi B? First of all, that would be one of those things where we would say maybe be better parents and don't let your small children listen to fucking WAP. Like, maybe that's it. Maybe bad parenting. Like, at the end of the day, it's not Cardi B's fucking job to shield your child's virgin ears. It's the parents. If you're incapable of doing that, then like, I don't know, fucking get good, loser. Fucking get good, sweaty. Fuck.
And students need to be able to be equipped with the skills to understand how to have safe sex. If parents aren't having those conversations at home and middle schoolers are getting pregnant anyways, like why can we not include that in the school so they have some form of information?
Again, it just goes back to the fact that so many of this issue is just not black and white. It really is 50 Shades of Grey, because like there is just no one size fits all.
50 Shades of Grey. Whoa,
what age do you think sex ed should be taught in schools? Like starting at what age?
Probably at some point during secondary school, because if we're talking about it scientifically, kids need to understand that science is a body of knowledge that we're building together. This is what we currently understand about human anatomy.
As far as like actually getting into intercourse and the details of all of that, in my experience, I usually at least start giving that understanding around 7, 8 years old.
I think that sex ed is a lifelong discussion.
7, 8 years old. That's actually pretty early. I would agree with that, absolutely. Your kids should probably be at least like aware of, like, because sexual education for like 2nd and 3rd graders is not like what's the word? Usually it's going to be implemented from like a very clinical and like uninteresting way, because you want kids from that age forward to be able to identify sexual assault and identify what is and is not okay behavior by adults.
And it starts, I mean, as soon as you can communicate. Now, that doesn't mean that you are giving a high schooler's curriculum to a 3-year-old, but I'm already talking about consent and using proper anatomical language with my children, and that's where it begins and it ends in adulthood.
I think as long as it happens in a way such that, to the point you were making, that like kids are being protected, that's what I would say we prioritize.
I would say go back to the way it was when I was in elementary school. They separated the boys and the girls, and the girls watched a video about their period and all these things. The guys watched another video. Yeah, it was health class. And then we didn't talk about sex education, the actual contraception, all of those things until high school.
I think we need to separate health.
So the way it is now, basically, I don't know if they split the kids up. Honestly, I don't think you need to split kids up, if I'm being perfectly honest. There's really no reason to. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. Like, what do you need to split the kids up for? I mean, we're all adults here. It doesn't matter. Even if you split them up, show them the videos separately, you bring them all back in, and all they do is snicker at each other and make little like jokes. Like you're not avoiding anything in this process.
Education from sex education. Health education should be lifelong. No sex ed for now, the way it's being taught in a lot of these states.
Let's talk a little bit about other things that fall under the responsibility of what teachers do in the classroom. What is CRT?
Critical race theory in reality is this complex legal institution that relates race to all of the institutions of America since its founding and since its birth. And it's something that I've never learned about in my classroom. I don't have any friends that have learned about it in their classrooms. It's something that's often taught on the graduate level or the undergraduate level. So I think that it's kind of not a great term to use in reference to conversations surrounding K-12 education, because it's not actually something that's even on like the docket for consideration.
That was a perfect description. I could not have done a better description if I tried.
It is in our schools. I saw the lessons that contain critical race theory in California.
It said the words critical race.
It said the words critical race theory.
And she's not wrong. She's not wrong, because some states have implemented CRT into their curriculum. It means different things for different districts. So this is about to be a very complicated conversation.
So in my district, and this isn't...
This person's great. I love this person.
California,
I wish they were my teacher.
They were requiring a class called ethnic studies in order to graduate. And in the class, they were taught about critical race theory. They were taught the definition. They were taught to analyze school policy through critical race theory. And they were taught how critical race theory is beneficial to analyze the U.S. It's basically like this idea that every institution in America, every institution, that interaction that you have has some sort of element of race, and usually there's a hierarchy of oppressed versus oppressor. And there are kids in America in K through 12 that are being taught that, and I'm so tired of people saying that's not happening when it is. And then when I expose it, I'm being called racial slurs and names for exposing it. And I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah, there's like kids in America, which again is some states, and not all of them, as that other person put, not all of them are teaching the exact same thing. Also, at the end of the day, critical race theory is like fine. It's really just a way of identifying systems for the most part. Like, I think I talked about this with Gaines at some point, but like, yeah, it's like the thing with critical race theory is, honest to God, the problem with critical race theory is that it's been painted as like this, like, oh, it creates like an oppressor class. It's like, well, not really. So like the idea is being able to identify basically groups of that hold like power in a society, and kind of the way that their influence is continually reinforced by the systems and structures that were built by that powerful group. That's really most of it. People make it into like an anti-white or like, it's none of these things. It's just a way of understanding the way in which the systems, the many systems of not just capitalism, but like political structures and societal structures bear down depending on people's race and like kind of how those things intersect.
So I think we need to stop saying it's not being taught in America and change it to should it be taught in America, because it is. It is. There are teachers that are teaching
It should.
So there's a recent bill that was passed in Texas called Senate Bill 3, and it completely revamped Texas's curriculum standards and basically eliminated all requirements for teaching of history education in Texas that relate to diverse perspectives. So teachers can go through the entirety of K through 12 education without ever talking about slavery as an institution, even though it's thoroughly ingrained into just the history, just the basic facts of America's history.
My understanding, I don't see the banning of slavery being taught in
It's
Texas.
not the banning.
Yeah.
The issue is that it's no longer.
I know that bill.
It's no longer required.
I know that bill, and I know it also states that you're not supposed to teach it in a way that causes mental anguish.
So it does not ban it.
Yeah, and like what's mental anguish? Like there's a reason why they put terms like mental anguish in there, and it's because it's something that you can't actually measure. It's not something real. It's just something that like that politicians and like right-wing operatives use as a like basically a catch-all term for like for whenever they like don't agree politically, they'll just be like, I have such mental anguish how you'd bring up slavery. Are you saying white people are bad? And it's like, well, no, but we need to teach slavery, and white people were the ones who owned slaves in this country. Slaves were 3/5 of a person, so we kind of have to teach that. But, you know, again, the like critical race theory, if you're looking at like the 3/5 compromise, would identify the very obvious relationship between citizenship and basically state voting power or state representative power, since that's where the compromise comes from.
It doesn't ban the talking of the institution of slavery, but it does create a loophole for teachers to never touch on the topic at any point in a child's education. And that is something that is happening. And it's something that is happening to peers.
Yeah, and you don't think there's going to be teachers who
in communities outside of, I guess, my home city of Dallas, but having traveled and having talked to students across the state of Texas, I can confidently say that there are teachers who are not teaching very key facts of American history because critical race theory conversations have so clouded the teaching of history as an entire whole.
And it's not often called CRT anymore. It's called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's called all these different names and labels because of how divisive of a thing that it is. And I think at the end of the day, the big thing here is that let's teach Black history. No one on the right is saying, do not teach Black history.
Did you notice how, like, nobody really talks about CRT anymore either? Like, the midterms happened and CRT, like, went from being, like, this thing that everyone should be concerned with to we never talk about it. Let me see if I can find like a chart.
History, do not teach slavery. If we forget those lessons of the past, we're bound to repeat them. But what we're also saying is that stop being vindictive towards white people for being white. No one alive today was a slave, and no one alive today owned slaves. And so for white children to sit in a classroom and be blamed for sins that they themselves did not commit is wrong. For Black people, for Black children to sit in a classroom and be told that because of the color of your skin, well, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you're really not going to go that far because the society hates you, and then you have all these structural barriers preventing your success. That is also wrong. That is not lessons of hope. That is not lessons of opportunity, and I think that is what schools should be about.
Wait, I thought we were supposed to be just teaching facts. I thought we were supposed to just be teaching facts and nothing else. Okay, so I found it. Okay, so. All right, critical race theory. Let's see. March 2022. Look at this huge spike. Whoa, look at this. And then disinterest. Actually, where's no, don't give me past 4 hours. What am I thinking? No, not wait, what chart is this for? 12 months? No, can I get more than 12 months? Is that a thing I can do? 7 days, 30 days, 90 days? 90 days? No. 90 days would not do me that. 5 years? No, that's probably too much. Oh, okay. Well, actually, we can kind of look at this. Let's see. Because what? The election was in November. So we got a big spike in September. Let's see. What is this? This is like June of 21. October. And now it's back down to all like this never was an issue until, whoa, suddenly it became something interesting to talk about. Presidential election this year, time to turn on the fucking CRT machine. Fucking let's see, what's the note? An improvement to our data collection system was applied. I don't care. And let's see, 2020. I want to see 2022. Let's see. Like, nobody's really interested in it in 2022. Nope. Yep. Yeah. Like, you can kind of see how this was only really interesting for the 2020 election. And then it was like, oh, okay, this really didn't do all that much for us. Anyway.
You can't create the next generation of leaders if they are never capable of seeing themselves as leaders, right? And I think like that.
Oh yeah. Also, let me go back and let me go back and hear the rest of the dumb shit.
That is not lessons of hope. That is not lessons of opportunity. And I think that is what schools should be about. You can't create the next generation of leaders if they are never capable of seeing themselves as leaders, right? And I think like that's not going to go that.
Do they have like a back 15-second thing?
Critical race theory conversations have so clouded the teaching of history as an entire whole.
And it's not often called CRT anymore. It's called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's called all these different names and labels because of how divisive of a thing that it is.
Diversity, inclusion, and equity and inclusion are different. Those are different.
It is, and I think at the end of the day, the big thing here is that let's teach Black history. No one on the right is saying, do not teach Black history, do not teach slavery. If we forget the
right, they're just creating loopholes for people to not do that thing. It's like it's rather obvious. It's like, yeah, you don't explicitly say don't teach this thing. You just leave the door open for people to not teach that thing, and then when they do it, then you go, whoa. And I guess they just determined it wasn't useful information for students.
Those lessons of the past, we're bound to repeat them. But what we're also saying is that stop being vindictive towards white people for being white. No one alive today was a slave, and no one alive today owned slaves. And so for white children to sit in a classroom and be blamed for sins that they themselves did not commit is wrong. For Black people, for Black children to sit in a...
I don't know what schools these people went to, but like we never learned that like white people like nobody stopped the presentation when we were doing slavery, when we were doing the Civil War and slavery. Nobody was like, okay, now we need to stop. Now we need all the white kids, we need you to stay seated. All the Black kids stand up. Okay, all the white kids, you need to say I'm sorry for enslaving you as loud as you can to our 3 Black students in our class here. Like this isn't happening. Like teaching slavery, teaching the horrors of slavery is not like anti-white. You would have to be a racist to think that.
Classroom and be told that because of the color of your skin, well, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you're really not going to go that far because the society hates you, and then you have all these structural barriers preventing your success. That is also wrong. That is not lessons of hope. That is not lessons of opportunity, and I think that is what
again. I thought we were supposed to be teaching only the Pythagorean theorem
right?
and facts.
And I think like that is what CRT.
Thought we weren't supposed to be instilling
in some ways.
Thought we weren't supposed to indoctrinate our kids. We're supposed to indoctrinate them with hope. The fuck.
It does to young children of color.
What CRT means to me is obviously really different from what it means to you. And when you were saying before, like kids are being anguished, I am not for kids feeling guilty about being born in the body they were born in. That's not what I taught.
What did you teach?
I mean, what did I teach? Well, for one thing, I taught about slavery. For another thing, I taught about like the ripple effects of slavery that we're still feeling today. In no way saying that people of color are less than or can't be, or no, not the opposite. Saying like people have persevered through things that I myself as a white person will never understand.
To really make this micro, the way I see it is there is no reason that kids of a certain age, right, because it's different teaching to a 6-year-old and teaching to a 17-year-old or in college, shouldn't learn about the history of slavery, the history of redlining, the history of Italians being lynched in this country, et cetera, looking at the facts.
We don't teach that enough, honestly.
That have happened so we can learn from it. That is a totally different conversation than when you've got instances like in Cupertino, California, where you have 7- and 8-year-olds who are being sat down and said, okay, time to do a privilege exercise.
That's what happened in
Let's write out, where you are on the power prism. Because that can create situations where students have warped views of themselves, especially if they're young. And I don't think it's appropriate because of the emotional impact it can have on folks.
If people are actually being sat down being like, if you're white, you're an oppressor and you're bad, that is not okay. That is not CRT. That is not critical race theory, and that is not culturally responsive teaching.
So it's not necessarily being blatantly said, but it's being implied over and over again.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So, like, they didn't say it, but I want to say that they said it. Okay. I don't like this lady. She's clearly dishonest.
There is definitely a way to teach CRT without it putting anybody down. But it's like, hey, just so y'all know, if you're interested, there's different types of racism. There's the idea of racism as you treat someone differently because they're a certain color. And yeah, you could be racist to a white person if you don't like them for being white. Now, there's also systemic racism because we took a whole bunch of slaves from another country and brought them over here. But with that said, right, there's different types of racism here. And you can expose yourself to
Keep in mind, systemic racism has like actually no interest in what the target race is. Systemic racism, most of the time, like systemic racism can be performed by any group against any group. Like you can absolutely describe any system of systemic racism like with any group. It's a universal like concept of discrimination. It just so happens that in America, if we're talking systemic racism, we're talking about systems built to favor, or at the very least to not favor black people, or more specifically poor people, which just happen to be black people on average.
At different times, but you don't have to make anyone feel bad. You just say the statistics the way they are. You're not saying one person's good, one person's bad. You just go over the definitions.
How should we be teaching race?
Well, I don't think we should be teaching white privilege in the classroom.
But teaching about race, like if you're, designing your ideal, setting.
Yeah, I think.
How do you think race should be?
Is that because you think it doesn't exist, or because they can't handle it, or like?
I think that, again, when it comes to the privilege discussion, like that's a great conversation for you to have with your child. But I don't think that taxpayer-funded.
So what are we supposed to do?
We allow in our schools.
Okay, bro. Real talk though, like brother to brother. Teaching white privilege does not inherently mean black people are less. Factually incorrect, right? So
what is white privilege?
White privilege is the idea of white people may have benefits that fall in a societal structure. Because they are white, they have advantages. Such as, for example, if you send out a resume and you make one name a white name and the other name the classic.
What's a white name?
White name was John, for example, right?
I know Black John.
Okay, no, hear me out. Let me finish, okay? We did a study. I didn't do the study, but
oh my God, this person's like, there's John's like, no, you dipshit. Holy shit. Just listen to it. Just fucking let them talk. Just shut the fuck up. Holy fuck. God damn, like.
Study where basically it was sent out 2 different resumes. They were the exact same, right? One was given a classic white name. The other was given the name Jamal. The white name got 2 times more callbacks.
And
right?
I disagree with what you're saying.
But the idea of white privilege, right? The idea that somebody that is white may have an advantage does not inherently mean you are teaching a black individual they cannot accomplish great things. That is completely separate. So we're talking about fake biological science and social science. We're not even in the same building at school right now.
Well, again, in regards to these like audit studies about like what is a
also keep in mind, people get really like touchy about white privilege. White privilege is not like you have it better. It just simply is describing in a shorthand way that like society is built more with your biases and your tendencies in mind. That's all that's going to mean. It doesn't mean that like it's going to target black people, but it is going to align closer. The society is going to align closer with more like what is determined to be white in the society's biases and experiences. Yeah, this dude, the dude right here in the front here mentioned the lynching of Italians, right? Which super accurate. We don't really teach that history much at all. But like there was a time when systemic racism would have affected black people in a negative fashion the same way it would have affected Italians in that way. This is what I mean by like systemic racism isn't interested in the actual target race. It's interested in the preferential race. It's interested in the preferential like racial identity, which doesn't really mean very much. Again, eventually Italians became part of white people, right? But it was only through like social what's the word I'm looking for? Integration to a degree, and like, you know, amongst other factors that I can't really think of at the moment, but let's just move on. That Italians got kind of rolled into the white identity in the United States, and suddenly Italians faced a lot more preferential systemic treatment. Again, it has nothing to do with you being white. It has everything to do with you aligning with the preferential identity and its biases and tendencies.
White name. It's not necessarily that the name itself is white. It's that the perceiver, the person that is reading the resumes, for some strange reason, feels like when they see a white name that they are on their team, or that there are positive stereotypes associated with people being white. That's what we're talking about when we talk about white privilege.
Yeah, like close your eyes and picture a Jamal. What do you see? And then close your eyes and picture like, I don't know, like a Michael. And like, depending on what you like envision there, if you're hiring people, there are people who like, they don't meet both of these people. They see both of these names. They see a Michael Johnson, or I don't know, Johnson. I'm trying to think of like a really, really like, yeah, we'll just go with Johnson. Fuck it. They see like a Michael Johnson and like a a like Jamal whatever the fuck, I don't know, I'm terrible with fucking names, but like the visions of what they think in their head are going to align with certain biases, right? And like the fact that on average people lean towards certain stereotypes, have certain biases, that tells us that the system and how we've socialized people and how we've kind of identified what is professional and what is acceptable, there seems to be a bias in there. Like it's really not that. It's not about white people. Like people tend to think it's like, oh, it's about white people being better. No, it's just about favoritism. That's all it's identifying.
Because she's a black woman, even though she is Oprah. But if someone was white and goes into the same store, some people, because of their own racial stereotypes, might believe that they can afford it. And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about white privilege. It's the sort of systemic benefits that you get from society.
No, I want to add, though, what you're describing, though, is discrimination. But to call it privilege, when the reality is, let's say you take the white person who would be considered white trash, you would get the same result from them. So I don't think you can necessarily assume that that's because of race, and definitely can't call it systemic because of personal decision to be discriminatory.
Should it be taught to our children?
Right.
And should it be, and should we be telling black kids that you're going to get discriminated against?
Okay, 1 second. Okay, hit me with that one more time.
The white person who would be considered white trash, you would get
from society.
No, I want to add, though, what you're describing, though, is discrimination. But
yes, it's systemic discrimination. Yes.
Call it privilege when the reality is, let's say you take the white person.
It's white privilege again is just identifying the group that has the preferential bias in their favor.
Person who would be considered white trash, you would get
like this is just fucking complaining about the terminology.
Same result from them. So I don't think you can necessarily assume that that's because of race, and definitely can't call it systemic because of personal decision to be discriminatory.
Should it be taught to our children? Right.
So again, if you can track millions of personal decisions, then like based on the system of hiring, then that is a systemic problem. It's not about the one guy who like hires for fucking Safeway who doesn't like Jamal's and like I don't know, Jose's and fucking all the other, and you know, and fucking I don't know. I'm awful with names. And like at the end of the day, it's not about the like one guy at like any store that just doesn't like the darkies working for him. It's about if you can find that trend across our economy, which you can through the study that this person mentioned, that these biases lie in a lot of different places that are disconnected. Some fuck-ass racist in like Alabama who just doesn't hire the blacks because he doesn't like the blacks somehow comes to the same conclusion because of his biases that somebody in like New York who just, you know, they see like a black name and they think, oh, that troublemaker kid down the street. Like these are still, they're disconnected. They didn't talk to each other, but somehow they came to the same bias and the same and came to the same conclusion, which ends up meaning that like black people might have lower employment, which guess what means higher crime rates because they have to find other ways to make income. Like people still got to eat, pay the rent, pay the bills, got to do something. If no one wants to hire you, then what do? You do illegal work.
Right. And
should it be, and should we be telling black kids that you're going to get discriminated against because of the color of your skin, with loans, with redlining, blah, blah, blah?
There is a way to teach cultural responsive teaching.
They should probably be aware of that.
Narrow-minded, but it's hard. But just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Even if you talk about the systems in place that privilege different groups at different times in different spaces, I'm not saying that when you teach CRT, when you teach about the history of this country that has privileged certain groups and not privileged black people, I think it's important to acknowledge that black people have persevered throughout that. There's so much excellence. And I think that you do all kids a disservice when you say, okay, the history of black people in this country or the history of women in this country is that they were oppressed the whole time and they weren't resisting. And then the Civil War happens and, the slaves are freed and the black people just stopped resisting, economic injustice until the Civil Rights Movement. That is not the case of history in this country. And so I feel like it's very important.
We also didn't do enough during Reconstruction.
It's about resistance. It's about resistance to the power structure that suggests that some people deserve to get more if they work hard than another group of people if they work the same level.
And not just resistance, but resilience.
You mentioned history, and a lot of you are educators. I'm just curious, What do you think should or shouldn't be taught, when it comes to U.S. history in the K through 12 environment?
So I think it's just this really unbalanced way that they're teaching it right now, especially the ones that are.
Oh my God, this person doesn't have opinions. All they do is fucking complain that they're like, I don't like how this was taught. Somebody said something I didn't like. They're asked like, how would you do this? And they open every time with, somebody else did it differently and I didn't like it. Like, holy shit, can you please come to this conversation with an actual fucking opinion and a vision? Because this is the problem I have, is people like this have no fucking vision for the future, have no fucking vision for education, have no fucking vision of what they want. They only know what they don't want. And we cannot build a society on what the things that we don't want. We will always find things that we don't want, but we need to find the things that we do and that offer us benefits. God damn it.
CRT, it's creating this narrative that it's all white people to blame when there was so many people involved in the transatlantic slave trade. The British were actually the ones that stopped it and used their own resources to stop the slave trading ships from continuing. They went to Africa to stop them, stop bringing them to the coast because we're not buying them anymore. And so this idea that I just feel bad for our children because they're not being taught it in a perspective that is holistic, basically.
And even to this day, there are slaves in Libya held captive by black people. So this is not a white and black issue. But even with that said, I think leaving the public school system... We're teaching
American... Holy shit. We're teaching American history. It is a white and black problem if it's localized to the United States. The concept of slavery is universal, but in the United States, it's localized to white people owning black people because that's how it took place here. Those were the two groups. White Europeans buying black Africans. That's how it worked. You can argue that there are black people who own slaves and are in Africa. There are black people who own black slaves. No shit, because it's Africa. It's not the fucking US. It's not the thing that we're teaching right now. Like, what the fuck?
I mean, when we talk about this, we left with the idea that black history is slavery and Jim Crow. And we're rarely talking about the Reconstruction era, the amount of senators and politicians.
We are not talking about Reconstruction.
Slavery.
That is true.
It was just so many things that we did after slavery
you
that
mean
we're
the
being told
systems?
we can't do today somehow. That is just asinine.
There's no conservative in America who's saying don't teach slavery in the classrooms. But if you're going to talk about slavery, to his point, let's talk about Madam C.J. Walker. Let's talk about George Washington.
You're so
Carver.
stupid.
Let's talk about all these black people who have done some really incredible things that, in spite of quote-unquote systemic racism and all of these things, have achieved. Let's talk about Barack Obama. Let's talk about Kamala Harris.
You're right. We don't talk about any of those people, including Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. You're totally right. We never talk about Barack. Fucking Jesus, kill me now. Smite me now, Lord.
Why is every conversation we have to have about black people in the classroom about us being in chains, downtrodden, and having no hope? That's a problem. And Black History Month, it's American history. Let's talk about that too. Those are important inspirational stories.
Cool. Can we talk about slavery? If we can talk about black history, can we please talk about how black people got here and the systems that bear down on them since their arrival in this country? No, because then conservatives bitch and moan that it's anti-white. If you want to teach black history, I'm totally fine with that. But you need to teach the actual history, and you need to teach how the slave trade and the prominence of slavery in the South, along with the Jim Crow era laws until the Civil Rights Movement, and after also what's all happened after Jim Crow. You have to fucking teach where all of this stuff comes from. So much American culture comes from the influence of African Americans, but so much of it has been obscured or actively obfuscated for the influence of white musicians, white influence, any of all this stuff. You can't talk about black history in America without talking about systemic racism. They're right there. Everything black people have done in this country has been a reaction to their arrival, their lack of freedom, their gaining of freedom, their perseverance through Jim Crow, their fighting during the Civil Rights Movement, and their proliferation as entertainment, as entertainers, as creators, as artists, as everything else right fucking now. But you cannot have this conversation without with just being oh, but if you talk about any of the systemic racism, then it's mean to white people. Okay, cool. Then we can't talk about anything then. Cool. Then we don't talk about any of the perseverance. It's not you need to teach all of this.
That are not taught in the classroom.
Do you think that the fight against CRT is hurting the like efforts for more like diversity and inclusion.
I don't want diversity and inclusion. I mean, we
want
already
more,
have that.
What I mean by that
Do
is
we?
like you said you want more like black
Is that
stories of
so?
hope and success and like.
Can you
all
give
of
me
that.
some
That's what I mean.
statistics
But
for
that's
that?
unfortunately not what
That keeps being
CRT is.
funneled.
Yeah.
I know.
That's actually
This person would have their fucking shirt tucked in.
I think what's really clear is there's a lot of big opinions on education, across the spectrum, and really thankful to all of you for sharing, your perspectives, where you're coming from.
Oh my God.
Some of you said it wasn't like this when you were kids. 20 years ago, school was really different. Maybe you couldn't even imagine having some of these conversations. So just want to pose the question to you, and where do we go from here?
I believe that we have to recontextualize the way that we approach education as a society, and specifically how we've kind of started to use education as a political tool. At its core, education serves society. It needs to be a collaborative effort, because if education serves society, society should be investing in education.
We as adults have a lot of work to do, and it's both at kitchen tables and school boards and forums like this. Obviously, literacy is a part of that, and I think there are other parts of that too. But the only way that we can move forward is if, instead of just talking about what do we talk to kids about, I think we have to first get better about how do we talk to each other about this.
I think we have to reset our education about actually preparing young people for the real world and acknowledging the fact that we're not going to have a one-size.
Let's prepare them with the real world by not teaching them at all about Black history, by allowing them to not be given a Black history training. Oh my God. Fucking let's teach them about the real world and about the Bible. Oh my God. I know, I interrupt this person all the time because they're so fucking stupid.
Fits all approach that works for every student across America.
God.
We have no room and no time, frankly, to teach all these divisive things because we have urban literacy rates that are down in the dumps. When those kids learn how to read, then we can talk about gender theory, CRT. But until we have children who are proficient and above a third grade reading level, and a majority of those kids in cities like Chicago and Detroit, we don't need to be.
Oh my God! Stop talking about Chicago and Detroit. It's so boring. So fucking boring. Wow, poor city, like cities made up of like of poor people who get poor educations because their poor school is funded by their poor taxes. Don't do well because they live in a poor neighborhood and go to poor and drive poor cars, are coming out with bad outcomes. Whoa, you fucking got me there.
Having a conversation about whether or not students should be learning about privilege in schools.
The number one policy thing that I come back to that we must do to improve
What's the harm of them learning
is to
about
put in
it?
school choice at a universal level. It's far too overdue. It will incentivize the public schools to fix a lot of the problems that they have.
How would it incentivize? How would it incentivize? If they don't have money, they can't do anything. It would literally be how would school choice help public schools? They wouldn't get any funding. They would be stuck with like $5 fucking for the entire year's budget. There'd be one teacher for an entire fucking neighborhood. Like, the only thing this would do good is private institutions and private education corporations would then get access to primary education. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word.
Back into the parent to get their child an education that best meets their needs. And I do think that if we're going to build the best generation of young people,
why don't we just fund the schools we have now,
kindness and active listening before we get into racial privilege theory, gender privilege theory,
educating our kids.
I think that it's so important to get back to critical thinking and understanding that
critical
the way
race
that we raise the
thinking.
next generation is also, not necessarily staying fixed ourselves. I think you were saying that, your wife is learning with the kids.
This is pain.
And if we continue to learn about, hey, how do we do this better for ourselves? How do we treat each other better? The more that we do that, the better that we will be able to collaborate with people we disagree with. The better that we'll be able to make a curriculum that actually does, speak about the excellence that you're able to do if you, continue to challenge yourself and strive and push forward.
On this panel, a really huge set of diverse opinions. There wasn't really a bad guy. It was, we all wanted the same thing at the end. We just had different ways to get there. So I just think the collaboration.
There was. We all know who it is.
Anyone.
I think we need to make sacrifices for our children's future and
I
prioritize
like this
them
dude
a bit
until
more
I
today.
learned he's
Aside from that, if you
homophobic.
choose the public school route, I'm all
Which is
for the
unfortunate.
collaborative effort, but what that needs to look like is parents showing up to the PTA meetings, showing up to the school board meetings, knowing and being inside the classroom and being actively involved regardless of which route you take.
I think we put too much faith into the education of our
I also
children
don't like
in
this lady.
public education when we should be doing more of that ourselves. And we need to make sure that we put more power into the parents and empower them to take control of their child's education.
We just need to stop burning down the house. I truly believe that we can save public ed. If we stop arguing with each other and start pouring more resources and like really buckling down to save this thing that really in turn saves us as a society, we can do it. We just need to stop chasing all of these like boogeymans that we are just like kind of seeing in the media.
You know, let her finish.
Polarize everybody and make everybody so angry. Like, we need to stop that and like save what we have, because what we have can be great and we need it.
Okay, I think that will do it for us. Thank you all so much for taking your time and for sharing your opinions and being so respectful of each other. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
You did it.
You did it. You passed.
Let's go.
All right.
Now what?
All right. Get me out of here. Jesus Christ. Wow, that made me angrier than I thought. Sometimes, you know, sometimes I wonder if I just like being, you know the thing that they tell, you know, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.